Hey everybody, CVH here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about Arena. I do play a lot of Arena, not necessarily too much for the YouTube channel, but if you follow me on Twitch, I do wind up streaming a lot of Arena. You can check the past broadcasts, particularly versus Arena. I find the format really fun and refreshing. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about problematic cards. Since I play so much Arena, I've sort of tried to get a handle on which cards are obviously good and bad, and certain cards from the recent Heroes of Skyrim expansion, well, I guess not super recent anymore, it's been about 4 months, but it is the most recent expansion we currently have, and I've been mulling over this topic for a while and really thinking about it before I did a video on it, but I kind of wanted to go over just a couple cards that I think are maybe a bit questionable, not really questionable design-wise, but maybe just a bit pushed for the Arena format, you know, where underplayed cards are more played because your access to cards is limited. You have to work with what you're given in a draft, and some of these cards might just be a bit too good, at least for their current rarity. That's something that is important, obviously, in this format, because you're not going to see legendaries super often, and when you do, you have to pick through 3 random legendaries of your class or neutral cards, so very hard to get exactly what you want, but commons and rares are much more frequent, so they have to be held to a bit of a higher standard as far as balance and reining them in and making sure they're not too good, because you might wind up with a lot of them. But like I said, I've been thinking about this for a while, so I wanted to do today's video and just mention briefly a couple cards that I think might be a little too good, a little bit problematic maybe for the format over a large sample size. But I do want to stress overall that I think in general they've done a really good job of balancing the Arena formats. I was actually playing a bit of Hearthstone Arena earlier today because they did that dual class thing where you can draft cards from 2 classes, and I thought that'd be interesting, and it did bring back a lot of memories of why I left that game in the first place. The Arena meta, just the drafts, I have to say a lot of the things seem balanced, not only with constructed in mind. People always ask why X bad cards exist in Legends, and I always point to Arena. Things have to be balanced not just for constructed, but a lot of the less played cards and things that don't quite make the cut in constructed decks do find a home in Arena. And in Arena, in Legends, it doesn't feel too common that a deck is wildly over or underpowered. Usually when you draft a deck, you think you at least have a reasonable chance to get a reasonable amount of wins. There isn't usually a big power discrepancy, I feel, between my deck and my opponent's deck. There are those rare cases when your opponent has 3 legendaries and they're all great and you got basically crap the entire draft, but that is pretty rare. So in general, I would like to shout out the awesome design of cards that have made Arena a fun and vibrant format. These are just a couple cards that I personally think maybe could use some tuning. My suggested fix, by the way, for these cards, I didn't get into them yet, but you'll notice that they are of the lower rarities, and I do think an appropriate fix for Arena wouldn't necessarily be changing these cards at all. I don't think they're that oppressive in Constructed whatsoever. A lot of these don't even see too much play in Constructed. It's just a matter of their rarities making them that much more common in Arena, which can then lead to them being kind of powerhouses in the format. So maybe making them short print or something of that equivalent in Arena, to where maybe you see them half the time of other cards of their same rarity, or just a little bit less of the time, something like that, if not a full rarity bump up. They have done that before. People who were playing in open beta with me might remember cards like Fiery Imp and Shrieking Harpy getting bumped up to rares, and that I think was mostly due to Arena balance. But let's get started with some cards. The first card I want to talk about is East Empire Crafter, and this is a card you're probably very familiar with if you played the Pauper Gauntlet format a couple weeks back. This easily defined the Pauper meta. Endurance decks using 3 East Empire Crafters just sort of steamrolled everything else, and I do think it sort of has that same effect in Arena. It's obviously a little bit less consistent because in Pauper you could build your own decks, obviously with the restriction of everything being a common. In Arena, you don't really have that control, but this card is, in fact, a common, which is why it saw play in the Pauper format, which means you're going to be seeing it a lot. And this is one of those cards that in Pauper stood out so much because there's just very limited removal in that format. And obviously in Arena, you theoretically have answers to everything. Theoretically, every card is available to you, but a lot of their removal options are way more rare than they would be in Constructed. Not every yellow, slower deck has access to Executes and Piercing Javelins. Not every blue deck has access to lightning bolts. Those cards just aren't as common as you would see in Constructed, so the chance of an East Empire Crafter sticking if you can ring it out on turn 2 or play it on turn 3 is rather high. And if East Empire Crafter is allowed to stick for a single turn, it can easily take over the game because so much of the Arena removal is basically just creature combat, your creatures attacking your opponent's creatures, and East Empire Crafter has an effect that basically prevents that from happening. You play East Empire Crafter into a Ring Cave Bear, turns it into a 6/7 with Guard. There are very few answers to that in Arena, and that can pretty much just lead to a victory by itself. This is one of those few cards that you play it down, and if it sticks for a turn, it essentially can lead to you winning the game. And that's not necessarily the healthiest thing, I would think, for the format. There are removal options, and it is prudent to take a few of them if you can see them efficiently, but it does feel like it's just a bit too powerful for what it should be done. Obviously, this card has similarities to Berserker of the Pale, the 4-2 in red that also buffs things with 5 or more attack, +1/+1 in breakthrough, but there are a few things that make that card more balanced even though it is fairly powerful in Arena, namely the fact that its stats are a little bit more offensive. A lot of things can attack and trade with something that is a 4-2 instead of a 2-4, so East Empire Crafter sticks just that much more often, and also the effect gives things +1/+1 in breakthrough, not guard, so even though you are getting a pretty big benefit from that card if it sticks for an extended period of time, it's not actively preventing your opponent from killing your Berserker, whereas East Empire Crafter can sort of protect itself with the effect. So, I mean, this card has been referred to by many people who play a lot of Arena as one of, if not the best, commons released in Heroes of Skyrim. I'm okay with cards being really good, I just think the way in which it wins games is kind of not the best feeling to lose to. It definitely feels good when you have an East Empire Crafter or 2 in your Endurance deck, I can tell you that much right now. It feels like your percentages of getting wins just went up a significant amount, but maybe this card should just be a little bit less frequent than the other commons in the pool in my opinion. The next card I want to talk about today is Mystic Dragon, and I affectionately refer to this card as the Cheese Dragon for the way it cheeses out games. 4-cost, 4/4 Prophecy. Incredibly simple card, very basic, and yet it just wins games out of nowhere. Prophecy, obviously, if you draw this from when one of your runes is destroyed, you can play it just for free, and in Arena, prophecies are a bit of a gray area, right? Because you never really know which your opponent got offered. Even though you might be playing against a blue deck, you don't know if they have Mystic Dragon, Lightning Bolt. A yellow deck, again, might not have Piercing Javelin. It's just kind of hard to make the right call, and most decks in Arena, there are some that you can get away with being strictly defensive a lot of the time if you're being pressured, but most decks do have to take sort of a middle-of-the-road, mid-rangey approach, and if you're questioning whether or not to attack and destroy one of your opponent's runes and get that bit of extra damage, chances are it's probably the objective correct choice to just attack, because you can't really base too much of your decision around prophecies when you're not even sure if your opponent got offered them. And Mystic Dragon is just one of the swingiest possible things your opponent could possibly get. Piercing Javelin and Lightning Bolt get a lot of hate basically because they are good one-for-one removal actions, but a lot of the time, especially in the early turns, a card like Mystic Dragon, a creature with enough stats to take something down and survive a trade, is way more impactful than a first rune, Lightning Bolt or Piercing Javelin. If you have a 2-2 and a 3-2 on the board, or a 2-2 and a 3-3, let's say, that's a bit more reasonable, and you break your opponent's first rune and it's a Mystic Dragon, that could effectively trade for both over the next 2 turns, and since no one's being hyper-aggressive, it's just usually better value than a Lightning Bolt. A lot of the time, Lightning Bolt turns into glorified Sharpshooter Scout, and Piercing Javelin turns into glorified Firebolt. Mystic Dragon is just a 4/4, and you can use that offensively to race your opponent, flipping the entire tempo of the game on its head, or you can use it to trade with your opponent's creatures, and there aren't a whole lot of answers that are easy to come by to a 4/4 in Arena. So this card is just incredibly powerful. But you might be wondering my thoughts on some other Prophecy creatures. This is one of the largest Prophecy creatures in the game, but it's not the largest. It's not the most swingy. There's obviously Loyal Housecarl, the 2/2 that gives +2/+2 in guard to something. There's Cloudrest Illusionist with a great summon ability, and there's Tyr, which has more stats, guard, and breakthrough. So I don't have a problem with any of these cards because clearly they've been out for a long time since they're all from the core set, and I would have made a video about them in Arena by now if I had a problem with them. The answer again is in the rarity. Tyr is a legendary and the other two I mentioned are epics, so they are incredibly rare in Arena. Even if your opponent's playing Crusader, they're almost definitely not going to have Tyr. Yellow decks typically don't have access to Housecarl and Cloudrest. Mystic Dragon is a common. It's not uncommon to see multiple of them in a draft, and it's usually the correct pick, which means this card swings games around way more often than Cloudrest, Housecarl, or Tyr, even though they are objectively probably better cards in your deck. They don't feel bad to play on curve, neither does Mystic Dragon, and since it's a common, it just swings that many more games around. So again, that would be my one suggestion. I don't think this card is overpowered and constructed. I just think the amount of games that a Prophecy swings things around in Arena, since it's so hard to play around that type of thing in Arena due to the nature of the format and how variant it is to actually get the cards in your deck, I would like to see Mystic Dragon maybe be a little less frequent. If anything is going to become less frequent, I would say East Empire Crafter and Mystic Dragon are two pretty good candidates. The last cards I want to talk about in today's video is sort of a pair of cards, and this isn't really a problem that I have in the same vein as East Empire Crafter and Mystic Dragon, which I think are just objectively a bit too good for the amount you see them. This is sort of a design thing. I want to make it clear that I don't really think these cards should be emulated too often moving forward in card design, just because I don't think they're particularly healthy, period. They do remind me a bit too much of Hearthstone cards, to be perfectly blunt about it, and that is Eldergleam Matron and also Revealing the Unseen, which I'll bring up for you guys here. And neither of these cards are really staple in any constructed decks. You do see Eldergleam Matron in a few aggressive green decks, and that's not something I'm particularly excited about, but Revealing the Unseen especially doesn't really see any constructed play, just a bit too variant, and that's okay with me. That's perfectly okay with me, but like I mentioned, a lot of those cards that don't quite make it too well in constructed do find homes in a lot of arena decks, and these two cards are no exception. So of course the reason Eldergleam Matron has seen some play and Revealing the Unseen hasn't seen a lot of play in constructed is because Matron does come attached with a 4/2 body for the same cost, and it's adding another definite body to your hand. So for an aggressive deck, playing a 4/2 for 3, not the worst, and unless you get something truly terrible like Prize Chicken, even Enraged Mudcrab is pretty okay. You get some beefy threat like Cave Bear, Swamp Leviathan, and it can even turn great. You are keeping that pressure up, and that's why it's such a great card in Arena 2. Again, Revealing the Unseen, not quite there in constructed, and a little worse than Matron in Arena 2, but can be even potentially swingier because the RNG pool is a bit higher. With the random actions, yeah, we don't have anything quite as crazy as like a Flame Strike or a Meteor in Hearthstone. That's quite that good, but we do have some very, very swingy pieces of removal, burn, all kinds of stuff in this game for actions. I've played against people who are Revealing the Unseen, and then all of a sudden that Battle Mage deck has a Dawn's Wrath, or the Sorcerer deck has an Unstoppable Rage. As soon as the Revealing the Unseen is played, it becomes essentially impossible to play around all the different contingencies. You can make reads on what your opponent has based on how they're playing and how they're trying to get you to play, but that's not super reliable, and it doesn't change the fact that Revealing the Unseen's power level is fluctuating incredibly high depending on whether you're getting a high roll or a low roll. There are tons of things. All of a sudden your Battle Mage opponent's access to Monk Strike for healing, for example. Just the crazy things that you have actually probably seen in Arena at one point or another thanks to cards like this. Again, I don't think this card's power level is too high at all. I just think it's high enough to see a good amount of play in Arena. And that's something I'd rather not have, because obviously they don't want to make this card so good it sees play in every constructed blue deck, because it's kind of unhealthy card design. And I love Arena not just because of the variance of how many different decks there are and how different the decks look and how unpredictable it is. I just love the skill involved with trying to predict what your opponent could possibly have and trying to make use of underplayed cards. The added variance to main cards like Revealing the Unseen and Matron is more of a put off than not. It can lead to some entertaining things for sure, but I'd rather see this card design kind of toned down in the future, so hopefully we don't see too many cards like Revealing the Unseen and Matron, even though I don't necessarily think these cards need to be changed in Arena currently. So that's it for me. Like I said, kind of a short list, just East Empire Crafter and Mystic Dragon for cards that I think are objectively a bit too powerful maybe. And I also want to sort of honorable mention Shearpoint Dragon on that list. It is quite the powerful rare. I do love the card. I love the card design of the card, but maybe Shearpoint Dragon could potentially be argued to be on that list as well, that we could maybe see it less frequently than other rares. And then of course, Revealing the Unseen and Eldergleam Matron for a couple of rares that I just think the card design in general is a little bit problematic, and I don't want to see too many cards like them in the future, but right now they're probably fine. Honestly, I'd be happy if we just heard that East Empire Crafter and Mystic Dragon would be just a bit more rare. Maybe they don't want to bump them up to rares, that's totally understandable if they want to keep them commons, but maybe short print them. I would be totally happy to hear that East Empire Crafter and Mystic Dragon would be 50% less likely to be offered in Arena, and I don't think too many of us would be unhappy to see less East Empire Crafters and Mystic Dragons on the opponent's side of the board. These are just my thoughts, just a couple of my cards that I want to talk about in Arena today. So let me know in the comments what you think about problematic cards in Arena, if you think anything that I mentioned makes any sense, if you have any ideas of your own to help the format out. And as always, if you've enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and stay subscribed for more Legends content. Follow my stream in the description, and I'll see you next time.